Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Celtics Roundtable here on the Boston Celtics newsfeed. It is Friday, and we're going to break from our usual schedule a little bit here to discuss all the training camp tidbits before the Celtics open up their preseason slate on Monday. I'm your host, Matt Ignal. We got Zaire here to provide some commentary, and on the phone we got Jared Weiss. Jared, you kind of occupy this nebulous space between roundtable panelists and the unwashed masses. How does it feel?
I'm just happy to be here. I'm just here so I won't get fined, as a legend once said.
Well, you're very special. You're the only person in the entire world that occupies that space. So we're happy to have you here. And with training camp going on, we've heard lots of different things, lots of different subjects. A couple, I think the last time we had you on, a few weeks ago, you thought that Aaron Baines was going to start at the 5 and Al Horford at the 4. Everything we've heard over the last couple of weeks is that Horford is sort of that guy right now. Do you still think it's going to be Aaron Baines?
No, so the assumption that it would be Aaron Baines probably, I would guess, 2 months ago, was basically that they had always gone with the method of having two bigs in the starting lineup, which is something that the Warriors have continued to do and a lot of teams have continued to do even when they play 5 out most of the time. Mostly because there's an old adage that you always want to start with your best defensive lineup, and also that it's really, as Steven said, I think either Thursday or Wednesday at training camp, is that the starting lineup is all about just having the right fit of players together at the beginning of the game that sets up all of your substitutions and rotations and lineups throughout the game. So it made sense for them to just kind of stick with the plan that they had with Amir Johnson and Al Horford next to each other the last few years and put Baines, who has a lot of similarities to Amir Johnson, including the fact that they both played in Detroit. But I think Johnson is a good level better than Baines. I don't think Baines is quite good enough of a player to justify starting on a team that has Eastern Conference Finals, if not NBA Finals aspirations. And, starting is extremely overrated. But if you are starting, it still means you're playing generally at least 15 to 20 minutes a game. Then again, they might just not put you back in at any point. But generally, your starters are supposed to reflect 5 of your best 7 players most of the time, because them playing the first 5 to 7 minutes of the game means they're going to be, keep taking up a significant portion of the minutes allocation for your team. So at this point, Marcus Morris, his trial just concluded, or the closing arguments just concluded of his trial on Thursday. And, if he's found guilty in this trial, which, we have no idea what's going to happen at this point, but if he is found guilty, the charge that he has in Arizona carries a mandatory jail time. He's a wealthy NBA player, and those guys tend to find their ways out of those situations. But even if he's found guilty, he doesn't do jail time. He still has a mandatory suspension from the NBA. So either way, the Celtics aren't going to be able to. If that does happen, wouldn't be able to start him to start the year. Obviously, we're not going to know until that verdict comes down. But there's a lot of variables at play here. I wouldn't be shocked if they started with Jaylen Brown at the 4 and kept Horford at the 5 and ended up with either Rozier or Smart in the starting lineup as well. So they have a ton of flexibility. I think that's all they really care about, basically.
That's interesting that you say that. Do you think the Celtics are real worried about Marcus Morris's trial and Marquise? Because
sure.
Okay, yeah.
Well, he's on trial for a charge that carries a mandatory jail sentence if he's found guilty. So yeah, they're probably a little bit concerned.
Publicly, they haven't said that though. They've downplayed it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no assumption of guilt or innocence or understanding of how this trial is going to play out at this point. Especially by myself, I am not part of the investigatory team for the DA's office in Phoenix, so I'm not going to pass judgment on what the outcome of the situation is going to be. They put forth a lot of interesting evidence throughout the trial. They're trying to paint the picture of the victim, basically trying to take advantage of the situation to squeeze money out of the Morris twins, and that they actually were not involved. We have, as a public, don't really have any idea what the truth of the situation is, but the bottom line of the situation is that there's uncertainty there. The Celtics are concerned enough that they don't think this is some sort of like obvious nothing's going to happen thing, because they sent Mike Zaire down, the assistant GM, who is also the general counsel for the team. He's a Harvard Law graduate, so he seems to know what he's doing. I know Mike pretty well, and he's probably the smartest person I've ever met in my life. But they're keeping their tabs on the situation. They obviously want to get Marcus back as soon as possible because he missed training camp and he could miss more preseason games. So, he's a new guy who they have to integrate into the team. So, like, that's going to be an issue, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's not starting. Let's say everything works out. Hopefully it works out for. Obviously, hopefully justice is served in the situation, but obviously, you would hope that it works out for Marcus as well. But even if he is, if he's found innocent at the trial and he's able to come back with the team, considering how little time he's going to have to integrate with the team, I wouldn't be surprised if we had an opening night lineup where it's like Marcus Smart is also out there, and then they have Jaylen Brown starting as one of the other big guys this year.
Zaire, you have anything to add?
First off, I'm hoping Jaylen Brown is not my starting power forward. I hope to any kind of possibility, period, that's not my starting power forward. However, the Morris twins with their situation, who knows what's going to happen with that. I definitely understand about how the system does squeeze money out of people, whether they be wealthy or not. So I can see that being the case with this situation, but, we just have to wait and see. I think that, going back to the Aaron Baines situation, I've heard a lot of talk about, with people saying that he's going to be better than Amir Johnson and his skills aren't better than Amir Johnson. I'm not expecting a ton from Aaron Baines. I just want him to be there, visible. I want the other team to not feel like they can push the Celtics around when he's on the floor. And if he can just give us that, then I'm thankful for that. Other than that, if he starts, okay, I'm not a big fan of that either. But if he does, do your job. Be out there, bang, make it easier for Al Horford, make it easier for, the little guys to crash the boards. And that's all we can ask from Aaron Baines. We really should not. They were upset at people like Tyler Zeller last year and Amir Johnson, but it's like, no, those guys, their roles weren't to be all-stars. Their roles were just to come in and do their job, and it was a minimal job. A very important job to an extent, but minimal nonetheless to the Celtics' success. Just do that and you'll be cool. So, yeah, other than that, I think that what we have right now, is going to be fine. And people just have to find their roles. But I really hope that the young kids get an opportunity to show themselves and prove themselves. And if they fail, they fail. But just have the opportunity. Don't be afraid to play the young guys like Shimmy, like Yabusele. Don't be afraid to give them that opportunity, because you just never know what you have. Oh, I've heard that on podcasts. I've heard that not just Celtic related podcasts, but just people reviewing, the East and the Atlantic Division and everything. And there are people who I've heard say, their names escape me because I wasn't paying attention to who they were, but just
yeah,
they're like, oh yeah,
nobodies.
Aaron Baines is better than Amir. He's definitely gonna do more. And I think a lot of people just slept on Amir because of he wasn't exciting, but he did his job, and the team won when he was on the floor. Period. Like when he was a part of the starting lineup, they won because he was important to the situation, just like everybody had a role to play. So, yeah, they just miss him. But, I'm going to miss Amir to an extent, but I'm not crying about it. But, Aaron Baines definitely, he has a job to do, and hopefully he can do it. But I'm not expecting a ton from him. I think people get excited. He's Australian. He looks different. He has the hair, and so people want more. But they're not going to get more. They're just going to get 4 points a game if they're lucky.
Aaron's is a decent rotation player. I think Amir is a better player. I think they would be better off having a healthy Amir, most importantly, than him. Yeah. Although I mean Amir played the entire year, so it worked. Hey, that rhymes. So it worked out for them. But he has had ankle issues pretty consistently throughout his career. Baines, for all their concerns about rebounding, and he's not a huge rebounder or any of that kind of stuff, he's a powerful guy, and like he at least gives them like the first guy they've had in a while, probably the first guy since Jared Sullinger left, that could actually throw around some muscle down low, besides Marcus Smart, obviously. But Marcus Smart is the most powerful human being that's ever lived. But Baines will bring them a nice wrinkle. He's not gonna do a ton for them besides just make a few good hustle plays, probably get into scraps with a few players that's gonna throw them off their game, and play some decent interior defense. And that's all they're looking for, really. And I'll just say none of it's going to matter come playoff time, because as we saw last year, whoever that starting four is, unless it's Jalen already, they're probably going to fall out of the starting lineup. And it's probably going to be Jalen at the end anyway, because Stevens is going to go very small for the playoffs.
All right, we'll change gears in just a second, but first I want to tell you all about Bombfell, the easier way for men to get better clothes. You complete a simple questionnaire and are then matched one-on-one with a dedicated personal stylist. When you sign up, you pay $0. You only pay for the clothes you keep, period. Bombfell is the only styling service that does not charge any fees to work with them. If you hate shopping for clothes, you can now do it from the comfort of your own home. Sign up today by going to bombfell.com, answer some questions about your size and style. Your stylist will email you his or her selections, after which you have a chance to make any changes you want. You can even cancel the order. It's the most simple, straightforward service around. They're on your side, and the service is completely flexible. You can receive clothes once a month, 2 months, whatever suits you. Listeners of this show can get $25 off their first purchase. Just go to bombfell.com/CelticsBeat. That's bombfell.com/CelticsBeat. So other tidbits from training camp here. Apparently, Brad Stevens, as you know, they've been working overtime just trying to get guys up to speed on both offensively, simplifying the playbook. Defensively as well, Brad Stevens said in particular that Kyrie Irving will have to get up to speed defensively because they do some things differently from Cleveland. Jerry, do you have any insight into what Brad's talking about here?
One of the things he's trying to imply there is that they are a very switch-heavy defensive system. So, I didn't scout Cleveland nearly as much as he probably did, but I watched a lot of their games this year, and I covered them the entire time in the conference finals. And with the way they guard the pick and roll, they do a lot of the more traditional hedging on the pick and roll. I'm sure you guys know what that is, but for our listeners, that's basically when the big sets the pick on the guard or on the guy defending the guard, which is also a guard up usually. The big man on the defensive side will usually try to jump out over that pick towards the backcourt to then do a sort of a trap on the guard, and the guard's option is usually to basically have to dribble backwards to get around him, and then that gives more time for the guard to retreat. That's what the Celtics did in the KG Big Three era. KG, probably the best at hedging the pick and roll of anyone that's ever lived. And although I didn't get to see Bill Russell hedge a pick and roll very often, but I'm sure he's pretty good at it. But I saw Cleveland do a lot more of that, a lot of blitzing where they're basically just both players are just trapping the ball essentially on the pick and roll, and they're kind of leaving the big for dead. The Celtics, they do a lot of what's called icing, which is essentially where they're kind of playing the big man is kind of playing a little bit of his own on the pick and roll, kind of hanging back a little bit, and they use three guys to kind of play a little bit of quick zone defense before they neutralize the screen. I think Kyrie's probably going to be doing a lot more of that, and then obviously a lot more switching. And switching, it's not ideal depending on the lineup that you have out there, unless you have a lineup where everybody's 6'7" essentially. But generally, you only want to switch when you have to. So switching requires really early communication and really knowing how to read screens so that you can try to avoid it early on and go into your more traditional pick and roll defense. Because if Kyrie has to switch onto a big or onto a bigger wing, he's really vulnerable there, and they're going to look to try to avoid that as much as possible, like they did with Isaiah Thomas.
I'm not sure what they're going to do at all. I can't sit here in front like I am. I didn't know half these dudes are going to be on the team this year. However, I think that Kyrie Irving definitely, will have to step up his role as a defender to some sort. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say he was an awful defender in Cleveland. I don't know if he was. I just know culturally as a team last year, they didn't take pride in defense. I mean, it showed the little 2-game stretch when they allowed 250 points. Just looking at the playoffs, they blew some teams out, but they had some games where you go, oh, yeah, they're a little suspect. The Boston Celtics just needed to make open shots. They had plenty of open shots. They just didn't make them. Kyrie Irving will have to step that up. We know this. And then going into the other situation where, and I don't know if this is where we were going, but I want to take it here because we don't have much time. This whole Dwyane Wade situation with the Celtics and the Celtics being involved in that, I got an opinion on that. I think that, I've seen plenty of times over the years where veteran teams and teams that are up for the championship go get those experienced guys like a Dwyane Wade at the end of their career. And people think, oh, Dwyane's in a great situation. Let me say this, man. I'm not quite sure, man. Dwyane Wade is a broken down bus. And, yeah, when he plays, he does okay. But he ain't the same Dwyane Wade he used to be. So the Cavs, I don't know. I think that this could pay off, but it could also be awful where he messes around and plays 35 games and isn't quite ready for the playoffs like he was for the Chicago Bulls last year. So, yeah, turning the corner there, I look at that situation and I kind of just blink at it and go whatever.
Jared, you had a take on this.
Yeah, so I guess you wanted me to plug my article. I'll plug my article. Why not? So over on CELTICSWire.com, it's my new website that I'm writing for.
Hey, congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, so it's CELTICSWire.com, or Celtics Wire, as you can call it, over on USA Today Sports Media Group. And so I did a piece because I'm trying to get that hashtag content out there. But it was a really interesting situation as Dwyane Wade became a free agent. And we all knew that the whole point of that was always to go to Cleveland. But the question, there was an open market for him. There's a lot of competition for him. The question would be, what would be the implication for the Celtics, who were not apparently in the running for Dwyane Wade. And, Cleveland I saw as the worst case scenario because it's not about what Wade could do for them this year in the short term. It's about LeBron's future. And we know that LeBron's future in Cleveland is very murky, despite him sort of saying that he's still planning to be committed long-term to Cleveland and whatever vague generality of a commitment he could possibly make. The fact of the matter is that his status in Cleveland is up in the air after this year. He clearly, I think it's pretty obvious that he does not have his mind made up. He doesn't have to want to leave Cleveland, but he doesn't have his mind made up on where he should be. And frankly, it wouldn't be a terrible decision for him to leave Cleveland for the Lakers as far as the future of his career. But being in Cleveland and having a good competitive year alongside Dwyane Wade is going to make him happier in Cleveland, or at least enjoy Cleveland more in this year where things could go really poorly. Not to mention, apparently Isaiah Thomas is planning to be back in January, which means that he's going to have enough time to get his feet back under him. That he should be, close to full strength at least by playoff time. So he, by the time that they get to the conference finals, which is pretty much assumed with this Cleveland team, Isaiah could be close to 100%, and then Cleveland is even better than they were last year, and they actually have a real chance at the championship. The point being is that by adding Dwyane Wade for all of his faults last year, for his obscene usage rate at this point of his career, he actually had a higher usage rate than Jimmy Butler, who was an MVP candidate and had an amazing year. His god-awful defense, which was surprising but not surprising, considering that he was at one point one of the best defenders on the planet. But, Kobe Bryant was one of the best defenders on the planet at one point. He was still making all defense teams while playing defense once a quarter, basically, in his mid-30s. That's what happens with these guys. But, adding Wade still definitely improves Cleveland. Like, there's no question. I can't even remember his name, but they cut some, young training camp guy to make room for Dwyane Wade. Dwyane Wade is going to be miles better than that guy. Dwyane Wade is still he's still a very good basketball player. And now that he's in Cleveland instead of Chicago, where his responsibilities are relatively small, he's going to be able to, for the most part, just do the things that he's amazing at. He's next to LeBron, he's next to all these guys. They're going to be able to cover up for him. So I'm not really worried about his weaknesses, like making him a net negative. Like, I think he's going to be a pretty strong net positive. But LeBron is back with Dwyane. He has one of his guys there, especially after James Jones retired and joined the Phoenix Suns organization, I believe. So Champ isn't around anymore. And Champ is like it's like one of LeBron's closest friends, and it's like one of those guys that keeps LeBron happy wherever he goes. So having Wade back is going to make LeBron happier. It could make this year go better for them in Cleveland, which puts more, it shifts the scales more towards LeBron staying in Cleveland, which is obviously bad for the Celtics' long-term future because LeBron's going to have to get to like age 40 before he's not the favorite to win the NBA, to win the East pretty much. Like this is going to be going on for another 4 or 5 years or so for LeBron. So they want him to go west and just hope for essentially a pretty clear path to the conference finals because there's only 2 or 3 teams that have a chance of really competing with the Celtics in the next couple of years in the East, besides Cleveland, and the Celtics would probably be well ahead of them for the foreseeable future.
All right, one more question, and then we'll let you go here, Jared. Marcus Smart has lost 20 pounds. He's throwing down alley-oops. He's throwing down 360 dunks. Jaylen Brown looks like he's added a bunch of muscle. Everybody's praising Jason Tatum. I think Al Horford said he's like the most ready rookie that he's ever seen. Who are you buying stock in for this upcoming year?
I actually got a pretty big pile of Marcus Smart stock sitting in the corner of my room right now. Marcus, like a lot of his weaknesses are remedied by him losing this weight. And I remember at the end of the season last year, just seeing him walking around, that he was like, it was pretty obvious that he had gained a lot of weight. I had heard that he was over 245. He said 240 at media day, so he was somewhere around there. That's what I had heard back in May or April or May, whenever it was. But he didn't look sluggish, but he looked gassed a lot of the time. And his big issue has always been that he hasn't been an effective scorer in the paint, something that he was amazing at Oklahoma State a few years ago, never quite had here. And he's never been quite in the shape that he is in now. But a big part of that was that he's not a great touch, or he's not like a great touch scorer around the hoop, but he's good enough that he could be capable. But he can't get off the ground when he jumps off one foot. And 80% of the time when you drive to the hoop, you're jumping off of 1 foot. Off of 2 feet, he's amazing. So when he doesn't have the ball, you see him fly in for those tip slams where he gets a 40-inch vertical, stuff like that. But jumping off of 1 foot, he was like completely grounded. It was like watching me trying to jump, which is nobody wants to see that. Or as my dad used to say when I was younger, you could slip a piece of paper under his vertical. That's basically what Marcus Smart had with the 1 foot jump. I remember interviewing him last year at the beginning, at like pretty much the exact same point of the year about this. And he mostly played coy. He was mostly just saying, that's just like how I play, and like kind of excuses like that. But like it was always kind of obvious. Like he was a little bit heavier. He had ankle issues that I think was a little bit injury related. I think his ankles are fine now, and now that he's lighter, that means his ankles are probably going to stay fine because that extra weight. I mean, it's 20 pounds, so we're not talking about like 50 pounds here. It's not like a complete transformation, but he looks clearly thinner. I hadn't seen him all summer until I saw him at media day on Monday, and I was shocked by how much lighter he looked. He looked like he lost like 35 pounds at least. Like 20 seems a little bit light. I think it's gonna make a big difference. We saw that one photo of him skying. I couldn't make it down to Newport this week, so I haven't seen him much in training camp, really getting up there. But people don't have to say that he's jumping out of the building. They could just say he looks better, but they're saying he's jumping out of the building. So if Marcus Smart is able to actually drive the lane and get up over defenders and get off clean looks, that's where he goes from being like a really good defender who also can be like a decent playmaker on offense and you just hope he hits a shot, to being like an actual like key part of the unit that's out there on the floor and can actually be a focal point for the team. And that's where he makes a leap from, being like a really good bench player to being a good starter on a contending team. All
right, Jared Weiss, everybody. By the way, I would like to see you jump and try to dunk. All right, that'll do it here.
I got a good 12-inch vertical. I used to have like a 30-inch vertical way back in the day, but it's been a little too long since then. A few back injuries later.
Well, I definitely would like to see that. All right, follow Jared Weiss on Twitter at Jared Weiss NBA. Also follow his new venture, the Celtics Wire. You don't want to miss that. That'll do it here on Celtics Roundtable. Be sure to send questions related to the preseason for our Monday Mailbag. Put your questions right here in the YouTube comments sections or tag at CLNS Roundtable on Twitter. Or better yet, leave a 5-star review from the Boston Celtics newsfeed, and we will definitely answer your questions. I want to thank Jared Weiss and my main man, Zaire, for joining me today. Our next show will be the Monday Mailbag. Send in your questions. I want to thank you all for tuning in.